So today in math we're doing lesson 4.3, module 4, lesson 3. And today we're looking at how we can express different math problems, the same math problem, in many different ways, using a division equation, using unit form. Did we learn how to do that yesterday?
Yeah.
Unit form? Good. Improper fractions and mixed numbers, and also how to use the standard algorithm to express those division equations. Okay, if we have the division expression 4 divided by 3, let's recall from yesterday how to write that into unit forms. If I have 4 divided by 3, I have 4 ones, and each of those ones is being divided into thirds. Do you agree? Okay. Have you guys noticed that the second number, the divisor, always tells you what your units should be? Remember we talked about that yesterday? So since we're dividing by 3, what's our units? Thirds. Okay. And after I split each of my ones into thirds, how many thirds do they have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do you guys agree? Do you guys agree that I have 12 thirds here? So instead of writing 4, I've changed the 4. My whole used to be 4, but I've rewritten 4 as 12 thirds. Is 12 thirds the same value as 4? So I'm just renaming it. It's like how 1 can be 2 halves, or 8 eighths, or 17 seventeenths, right? We can also rename wholes using different units. 4 is the same thing as 12 thirds. All I did was I took the 4 and I split them up into thirds, and now I have 12 thirds. Because I have 3 times 4, and that's why it's 12. Do you guys see that? I'm still dividing by what? Yeah. So when your divisor doesn't change, okay? Now, what's 12 divided by 3? 4, but what's my units? Thirds. And so this right here in red, this is what unit form is. You know it's unit form if you have words telling you what your units are. What's the units? Thirds. I have units in my whole and in my quotient. Okay? What's our divisor? What's my units? Remember that the divisor will always tell you what your units need to be. Okay? Now if we have 4 thirds, how can I write that as an improper fraction? Well, it's just 4 thirds. Do you agree? Simple, right? We can go easily from the word form or the unit form to the improper fraction. Now, I know it's an improper fraction because my numerator is 4 and my denominator is 3, and 4 is larger than 3. That means that it's an improper fraction because I have more than one whole. How many wholes would it take? How many thirds does it make to make one whole?
3.
So 4 thirds is the same thing as 3 thirds plus 1 third. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Therefore, as a mixed number, it would be 1 whole and 1 third. So this is the form in mixed numbers. Do you guys agree? Very good. Now let's tackle the standard algorithm. Remember the standard algorithm is when you write division with a house. Who lives inside the house? The whole, because they both start with the h sound, right? So what number is the whole here? 4. Okay, so 4 is inside the house. Who's knocking on the door? The D, which is the divisor, which is what number? 3. Okay, so it's super important to remember the h sound and the d sound. Whole lives in the house. Divisor knocks on the door. Now we use the dad, mom, sister, brother technique. Dad divides first. If I have 4 and I want to share it into each group, how many could each group get? 1. Dad divides and gets 1. Mom multiplies. 1 times 3, how many did we use up? 3. Sister subtracts. If we had 4, we used up 3 when we shared them. How many do we have left? 1. We have a remainder. We've learned that we could regroup that 1 to turn into decimals, right? To turn into 10 tenths. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to write our remainder as a fraction. How many do I have left?
1.
My remainder is 1. If I have 1 piece left and I want to share it with 3 people, how much does each person get? 1 third. So that fraction becomes 1, or the quotient becomes 1 and 1 third. I know it's hard to see there with the words. But do you guys see why it's 1 and 1 third? Because I have 1 left over and I want to share it amongst 3 people so they each get 1 third. We've now learned how to write a division expression as a division expression, how to write it using unit forms, improper fractions, mixed numbers, and the standard algorithm. On your lesson 3 problem set, look at question number 1. There's a chart on that page, and it says fill in the chart. The first one's done for you. Now, if it's done for you, does that mean we just skip it? Let's take a moment now to analyze what they did, okay? So, what was the division expression that was given to us? 5 divided by 4. That's the division equation. Okay, so looking at that, how do we know? Well, the 4 tells us our units needs to be what? Fourths, okay? How did they go from 5 to 20/4? Well, how many fourths are there in 1? 4. And how many units do we have? 5. So 4 times 5 is 20/4. Do you see how they got there? Okay. Then we're still dividing by 4. And so 20 divided by 4 is what? 5. And what's our units? So this is the unit form. Do you see that? Then from the unit form, we can very easily write the improper fraction, can't we? It's 5/4. Then, how do we know 5/4 is an improper fraction? Because the numerator is what? Yeah, greater than the denominator. How many fourths does it take to make one whole? 4/4. So 5/4 is the same as 4/4 plus how many more fourths? 1/4. And so to go from the improper fraction to the mixed number, I just replace this 4/4 with 1 whole, and then my 1/4 is still there. Do you see that? Okay. Now let's take a look at the standard algorithm. 5's living in the house because it's the whole, and 4's knocking on the door because it's the divisor. If I have 5 and I want to split it by 4 people, how much does each person get? 1. So you can see that they wrote the 1 up here. Dad wrote the 1 up here. Then Mom multiplied. 1 times 4 is 4. Sister subtracted to find a difference of 1. If I have 1 left and I want to share it with 4 people, how many does each person get? 1/4. That's why your entire quotient is 1 1/4. Then you don't have any more remainder. Do you see how that's how you use up your remainder? Have you guys noticed that the remainder as a fraction is always the remainder over the divisor? 1/4 to get 1/4. Now to check, look at this. When you check, you can always multiply the remainder by the divisor. So 4 copies of 1 1/4. Well, what's 4 copies of 1?
4.
What's 4 copies of 1/4? What's 4 plus 1? 5. Is that what we want to end up with? Very good. So it's very important that you check your work after by multiplying your remainder. What do you multiply? Your quotient times your divisor should equal your whole. You might want to write this down for how to check. Your quotient multiplied by your divisor should equal your whole, and if it does, then you can put a check because you checked your work. We need to remember to check, we need to multiply the quotient. What's the quotient in this equation? 1.5, that's the quotient. We need to multiply the quotient by the what, Jithia? By the divisor. What's the divisor here? 2. And we want it to equal the what? The whole. Okay, so we want it to equal 3. Should I just write 3 right there? No. Okay, what's 2 copies of 1? 2. What's 2 copies of 1/2? What's 2 plus 1? 3. Is that our whole? We can put a check. We checked it, and we are confident that our answer is correct.